Hey everyone, I hope you've had a great week so far. We're in the second half on our series on ministering to people in crisis. And this half we're going to be looking at 3 specific lessons on the topic of sex. Next week we'll be looking at homosexuality. On February 22nd we'll be looking specifically at pornography, which is very interesting because our youth who are on a separate lesson series also have a lesson on pornography on February 22nd. So that will make for some interesting conversation around the lunch table come Sunday afternoon. Anyway, our lesson this week is in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 through 10, and the topic is When Sex Destroys. I just want to look at one verse in today's video, specifically at verse 3, which says, "But among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality." And I guess a question to ask is why, especially in today's culture. Why is that an important thing? Well, the marriage relationship was to picture the relationship between God and His people, and that relationship is built on fidelity. God is always faithful to us, even in our unfaithfulness. And the Old Testament, especially the Old Testament, refers to spiritual unfaithfulness as spiritual adultery. And even some stronger language, it likens it to prostitution. So God wants our fidelity in our marriages to reflect His fidelity to us. So as we're teaching the lesson, let's think of some practical ways in which we can do this. One of those is to remember the lessons from the Sermon on the Mount. Remember, one of the specific things Jesus was trying to get across was that it's not enough to just physically not have an affair, but we must keep pure in our thought life as well. It was an internal versus external struggle that Jesus was approaching. We may not have had physically committed adultery, but what's in our heart? Is it lustful thoughts? And so that's kind of where we're going with here. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5 says this, "We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." I had a pastor friend who likened this to a lasso, to whenever one of those thoughts came into his mind, he would, in his mind mentally, lasso that thought and tie it up to where he wouldn't think about it anymore. So that's one way of thinking of it. Martin Luther said this, "You can't stop birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from making a nest in your hair." And what does he mean by that? It means we can't really help what comes into our line of vision, but we can help what we dwell on. And that's where we need to be proactive and stop those thoughts. So how can we do that? Well, first, of course, as we said, is to be proactive. Decide that you will not allow yourself to go down that slippery slope. If you find yourself maybe in a little bit of a flirting situation, maybe some inappropriate comments, that's the time to stop that. And when you do find that bird flying over your head, it's best not to dwell on that, to take captive that thought. And the thing is not to dwell on not thinking about it. Because if you were to say to someone, "Hey, I want you to take for the next 10 seconds, try not to think of the number 13. And so in the person's mind, they're thinking, okay, I'm not supposed to think of 13. Oops, I just thought of 13. See, it's the same way when we try not to think about something, we end up thinking about that very thing that we're not supposed to be thinking about. So instead, we should follow what Philippians 4:8 tells us to do. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. You see, you just don't go from having a perfect marriage to waking up the next morning beside somebody who's not your spouse. See, that usually there are little steps along the way that take you from one point to the other. Usually starts with a thought, maybe a little flirtation, maybe checking out a dating site, maybe trying to connect with an old boyfriend or girlfriend on Facebook. And that's a downhill slide. You see, it's best to stop that in its tracks when that bird's flying over your head, to have not even a hint of immorality. Now, please get across to your class that sex is not bad. This was something that God created for what I like to term the 3 Ps, procreation, partnership, and pleasure. But, of course, there are boundaries with that. And an excellent illustration is a fireplace. A fire works best in a fireplace, and if I want to have that fire out in the middle of the living room floor, I guess I could, but I'm going to burn the house down. You see, there's an appropriate place to build a fire, and that's similar to the boundaries that God gives us for the sexual relationship. So like most of the Christian life, it involves self-control and discipline. God gives us an appetite for food, that we have to control that. He gives us a tongue to speak with, but there again, as we read in James and other places, if we don't control that tongue, if we're not disciplined in that, that can be like a fire that's out of control. He also gives us a sexual appetite that we need to control that as well. So try to get some of these points across to your class this week, and have fun with that, and we'll approach a couple more topics in the next couple of weeks. Bye.